Today, we're exposing 6 of history's most shocking and dark secrets that were deliberately hidden from the history books. Number 6. Joan of Arc's Dark Final Days. Here's one of history's most horrifying secrets about Joan of Arc's final days, and it's worse than anything your history books revealed. You were told she was burned for being a witch. The dark secret truth is far more twisted. After finally capturing the teenage girl who had humiliated them in battle, English officials orchestrated one of history's most sadistic death traps. They threw her in a prison cell with guards specifically chosen for their violent reputation against female prisoners. These weren't ordinary guards. They were the worst monsters the English could find. Joan's only protection was her male clothing, which made it harder for them to assault her. And here's the truly evil part. The judges knew this. They knew exactly what horrors awaited her if they could force her into a dress. It gets worse. When they finally pressured her into wearing a dress, these holy men of the church gave their guards free rein to terrorize her. Imagine a teenage girl being hunted in her own cell while judges and priests deliberately looked the other way. Desperate to protect herself, Joan put her men's clothing back on. That's exactly what they were waiting for. These men of God immediately used it as their excuse to burn her alive. Let that sink in. They orchestrated the whole thing. These weren't just executioners. They were religious leaders and judges who deliberately forced a teenage girl to choose between assault or being burned at the stake. Every detail of her psychological torture was carefully planned, right up to her final moments in the flames. Number 5. The dark secret of the crippled prince's blood-soaked rise to power. This is one of history's darkest revenge secrets that outshines all others. A young Sundiata, physically deformed and unable to walk, is forced to watch rival warriors slaughter his entire family. His father, brothers, sisters, all butchered before his eyes. Now, why did they let him live? Because they thought it would be crueler to let the worthless cripple suffer, dragging himself around like a beggar while they claimed his father's palace. History would prove this to be the biggest mistake of their lives. While his family's killers lived in luxury, sleeping in his dead father's bed, Sundiata was transforming through sheer agony. Covered in mud and blood, he crawled through dirt, building his arms until they were stronger than iron. People mocked him, kicked dirt in his face, and treated him like an animal. But something dark and terrifying was secretly growing inside that broken boy. Then came the moment that changed everything. Using an iron rod so heavy that 7 men couldn't lift it, this crippled prince did the impossible. He didn't just stand up. He ripped the metal bar straight from the ground with his bare hands. The same people who had spat on him suddenly realized they'd created a monster. And that was just the beginning. Sundiata transformed from a boy who couldn't stand into a warrior so feared that armies surrendered at just hearing his name. He spent years building the most brutal fighting force in West Africa. When he finally returned for revenge, it was like a nightmare had come to life. The warriors who had laughed at the disabled prince now faced a conqueror who showed no mercy. But he didn't stop at reclaiming his kingdom. He built the Mali Empire, one of the most powerful realms Africa has ever seen. Number 4. The Vatican's dark secrets and twisted sex tunnels. Very few historical secrets are as shocking as this one. The Vatican had a massive secret tunnel system called the Passetto di Borgo. It stretched 2,600 feet long and was supposedly built for papal escape routes. But Pope Alexander VI transformed it into something far darker. We're talking organized orgies, ritualistic sex parties, and outright satanic ceremonies right beneath the Vatican. His main mistress, Giulia Farnese, became one of history's darkest secrets, so blatantly paraded around that people mockingly called her the Bride of Christ. But she wasn't alone. The Pope had a secret, dark history of keeping a whole harem of mistresses hidden in these tunnels. He'd host what were called banquets of chestnuts, where naked women of the night would crawl around picking up chestnuts while church officials watched. He even fathered multiple children while serving as Pope. He used his holy position to make his illegitimate children cardinals and bishops, one of history's most blatant cases of corruption. One of his sons, Cesare Borgia, became so corrupted by power that he turned into a murderous psychopath. Cesare killed his own brother and became the inspiration for Machiavelli's The Prince. The tunnel system became an underground network of history's darkest sin, where the holiest man on earth indulged in every dark secret desire imaginable. This isn't some medieval myth. All of this dark history was documented by horrified Vatican historians. Talk about a holy mess. Number 3. The dancer who brought down Japan's war machine. Claire Phillips might be the most hardcore exotic dancer in history. Not only was she entertaining, but she also ran the most dangerous and secretive dark spy operation of World War II right under the Japanese army's nose. She turned her Manila strip club, Club Tsubaki, into a full-fledged secret espionage headquarters. She'd seduce and then sedate high-ranking Japanese officers, stealing their military secrets while they lay unconscious. They called her High Pockets because she'd stuff classified documents in her bra between performances. Things turned horrific when the Japanese eventually captured one of her couriers. They transformed him into a living nightmare. We're talking about weeks of torture so dark that the most dangerous criminals would puke at the sight. They pulled out fingernails, peeled off skin, and kept him alive just long enough to prolong his suffering. Claire was forced to watch them slowly dismember her courier, thinking she would break and divulge her secret. When they finally caught her, they stripped her naked, hung her upside down for days, and starved her until her bones protruded through her skin. Every morning, they dragged her out to witness the executions of her fellow prisoners, cutting off heads, burning people alive, and burying them up to their necks in anthills. She never knew whether each morning would be her last. After surviving this literal hell and helping to save scores of American lives, the United States government essentially spat in her face. Military officials branded her a liar and a prostitute, refusing to believe a woman could outsmart Japanese intelligence. It took decades before declassified documents finally proved everything she said was true. By then, she'd died in poverty, her mind shattered by the dark horrors she had endured. Number 2. History's Dark Secret. Caligulas Empire of Enforced Agony. When Emperor Caligula's sister Drusilla died, he didn't just go into mourning, he dragged millions of people into his personal nightmare, which brings us to one of history's darkest secrets. Caligula's guards would patrol the streets looking for any sign of joy, and we mean any sign. People were brutally executed for crimes like washing their faces or feeding their children without crying. Parents had to teach their kids to fake sob while eating to stay alive. If you were caught smiling at your baby, death. Humming while working, death. Soon, the streets of Rome were filled with people mutilating themselves to prove their grief was genuine. But that's merely the beginning of this freak show. Caligula kept his sister's decomposing corpse on a golden couch in his dining room. During state dinners, he forced guests to watch him comb her decomposing hair and kiss her rotting lips. He made senators sit for hours in front of her decaying body, often having the guards execute anyone who gagged from the stench. When people finally convinced him to let her be buried, he had the undertakers tortured to death because they touched her without permission. Then he declared her a goddess and would randomly select people from crowds to be sacrificed to her. This wasn't just some brief period of imperial darkness. It went on for an entire year. Thousands died in increasingly creative ways as Caligula's mental state deteriorated further. The most chilling part is this isn't some exaggerated legend. It's all documented by multiple Roman historians who survived this year of enforced insanity. Number 1. The Dark Secret Society History Forgot. Georges Bataille's intellectual death cult. This has to be one of history's most disturbing secret societies you've never heard of. In 1930s Paris, philosopher Georges Bataille created Acéphalie, a cult dedicated to experiencing death through human sacrifice. But this wasn't some backwoods group of lunatics. These were Europe's leading intellectuals and artists gathering in the woods at midnight, wearing black robes, standing around a tree struck by lightning. They weren't just playing dress-up, but became absolutely convinced that the only way to truly understand death was to experience ritual murder firsthand. They'd gather in the forest, performing elaborate ceremonies involving decomposing animals and occult symbols, all building up to their ultimate goal, human sacrifice. When they finally decided to take the plunge into actual human sacrifice, they had willing volunteers. Educated, sophisticated people were literally volunteering to be ritually murdered by their fellow intellectuals in the name of philosophical enlightenment. The only reason this grotesque plan fell apart was because they couldn't agree on who would be the executioner. Everyone was willing to die, but nobody wanted to live with the guilt of being the killer. The most disturbing part is their secret writings and rituals influenced an entire generation of European thought. Some of the most important philosophical works of the 20th century were written by people who spent their nights in the woods practicing for human sacrifice. The same minds shaping modern intellectual thought were one step away from becoming ritual murderers. From religious leaders to emperors, these disturbing revelations prove that sometimes the most famous figures in history harbor the darkest secrets. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. See you in the next video.